So, carrying on at the mental hospital. So I'd be there for about probably the first few hours, and at that time, you get settled into your little area, into your bed area there, and there's usually four other people to a room if it's a ward bed. They also have the semis, which is two people per room, and then single rooms if you're rich. Anyway, or if that's what you prefer, whatever. So I was in the room, there was five of us, which is great, right? Anyway, in the evenings, well, it depends, right? Whenever your medications were, they would come and make sure everybody had all their medications. They'd bring them to you. But in the main area, there was an area there where you could watch TV, but it was whatever the people that were there the longest, most of the time they would choose what was going to be on TV. So it's not like you really ever had to say. You just sat there and watched whatever people were already watching, or you went and did something else. There's a room in there, so there's a big circle, kind of goes all the way around, kind of like a square with rooms all on the outsides all the way around, and then on this side there was the kitchen and all the tables where everybody would go to eat. And on the other side there was the rec room, which was really nothing in there. They had a bike, I think, that barely worked. Coloring books that were really old and had been there for years. Puzzles that looked like they had been put together a million times with rough boxes. Nothing was in really good shape there. Crayons were not new. They were very old and tattered. And hard to color with, but they would, you'd go in there and color or something, or they'd have a few books, and then you could read some books if you wanted to, but there wasn't very many to choose from. There was always water. You could always have water all of the time, day or night, and coffee and tea, day and night, as much as you wanted, but you get bored of that too. There was like a little patio where you could go out. They'd lock it at night after 8 o'clock. You couldn't go out, and it didn't open till like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. They had a nice gazebo out there and a few flowers. They tried to make it kind of nice, but you knew you couldn't get away. And so after 2 or 3 days of that, most people didn't really go out there, and you're kind of, I started getting crazy after a couple of weeks in this joint because you wanted to be free, right? Like everything was controlled and you were watched constantly, and it just gets old after a while. So after 2 weeks, in this routine, I kind of was starting to go crazy. I kind of wanted out. So during the day, for the first 3 or 4 days, you're not allowed to enroll in any classes because they're still kind of watching you and having a few talks with you with the psychiatrist and seeing where you are and how you're doing, if you've settled in, basically. Then after like 3 days or so, they have these classes during the day, which they're all quite non-informal and stupid as far as I was concerned. They weren't really in depth that much, but anyways, maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But they'd have different things that you could do, and in the evening, somebody would come in, some volunteer, some young person, and we get to play a video game, and they would bring board games in, and you get to sit down and play board games. They'd play with you and stuff, and music and things like that. That was, after a few days, so I didn't mind that so much. The thing that kept my sanity in the mental hospital was the friends that I made and the friendships and my bunkmates. We'd sit on the edge of the bed and we would laugh and giggle and walk, around in the square over and over and over again for our exercise, and we would just talk about everything, and just spend time together and eat together and go to classes together. And it's amazing how you can find a routine out of next to nothing. We got to go outside. You got to go for a walk outside, but you had to, stay in the group, and you had to keep up, and you had to be with an instructor or a counselor or psychiatrist or whatever the heck they were, social worker. I don't know who this person was, but somebody would take us out on these walks, and it was probably the best part of being there. But after about 2 weeks of being in this hospital, I was begging to get out, begging to go home, even though I knew I wasn't quite ready to go home yet. You go crazy, mentally crazy. You miss your family, you miss, your home life, you miss freedom, you miss being able to do what you want when you want. So it's really, that's kind of what it's about. The food there, you're allowed to have 2 helpings, 2 or 3 helpings if you were hungry. You'd open up the like when you go to the hospital and you have those refrigerated doors that open on the sides, and they have like the fruit in there, or puddings or juices or milks. You could have as many of those as you wanted. So most people would take 2 or 3 milks and a couple juices and a couple cookies, and you'd put them in your drawer so you could have them for snacks later during the day. Stuff like that. And at night, before you went to bed, around 9:30, everybody would meet out in the front, and they would have a whole cart of crackers or cookies or little sandwiches, juice and milk. And so you're never hungry, you never went to bed hungry, you're never thirsty, but you were confined, and it did feel like prison, and it was really hard and difficult for me to go through this. And I begged to leave after a couple of weeks because I volunteered to go in because I was trying to get some help. But it turns out that the medication that I was on was causing me to feel this way. Because as soon as I went off the medication, I haven't had any problems since. And that's been over 2 years now where I haven't gone in there and begged to get admitted into the hospital because I didn't think that I was going to be able to get through the night. Sometimes, I just had a hard time with medications, so you have to be careful and pay attention to how things, affect you, and medications and how they affect you. Bed at night, you had to try, and everybody kind of had to be happy around, so if somebody wanted to go to bed at 9 o'clock, everything had to be quiet in your area, in your room by 9 o'clock, and after a week or so there, people could bring you in your own books, and that you were able to have access to all of your things again, but you weren't allowed to use your phone inside your room. You had to go outside. People had smoke breaks every hour or hour and a half, where they get to go out and have their smoke breaks. So freedom started to be given to you more and more the longer you were there. And they would make sure that when you were all done with your help there, they never let you go until they knew you had a place to go, type of deal. So people that, didn't have an apartment or something or whatever, they would keep them in the hospital a little longer until they could make sure that they had a place to go when they left. There was always aftercare as well at the hospital, but I never did that because I just wasn't strong enough at that time, and I didn't realize I was as sick or unable to do things as I really was. So I wish I would have taken advantage of that, and I wish I would have stayed in the hospital. Like, it got to a point after it was like 2.5 weeks or going on to 3 weeks, where the doctor was going to let me go home for the night and then come back the next day for classes and then go home for the night. And I should have done that. He wanted it to be a slower process for me to go home, and I never listened. So, because you start going crazy, you just can't stand being there after about a couple of weeks. You just, for me, I couldn't stand it anymore. I just had to go home. It's kind of what happens. So that's what it's like at the hospital. The day that I left, I was out and within a couple of hours that day when I said I wanted to go home. So you wait for all the paperwork to get done. You wait for everything to become official, for the psychiatrist to sign his name off and give you a check mark. Then you get your bag of all of your stuff. You get changed into your civilians. And then they open the door and they say, have a nice day. And you walk out and you're free. It's really that simple. So after 2.5 weeks, when I stepped outside for the first time, it was so strange. It felt so awesome to be free. Anyway, that's what it's like to go to a mental hospital.